think there's a lot of different factors that have taken place downtown Hamilton. There's been a lot of revitalization, and the arts and culture scene has really taken off, which has made the downtown core a lot more interesting for people to live on.
It's really interesting to see how much things have changed since about 10 years ago, when, for example, Beasley Park was a place that a lot of people in general would just talk about as a dangerous place or somewhere they wouldn't want to go. We started just doing a lot of barbecues and events in the park, and we found that, you know, if you just talk to people and invite people along, they're gonna respond. And the park is now, it's pretty quiet now because it's school hours, but the park is a really active, lively place with people from all walks of life who hang out here.
When cities actually prioritize the interests of people who do have more disposable income, who are relatively newer to some of these communities, and make the interests of those with less income less of a priority, then displacement happens, right? Displacement ensues. And planning doesn't have to prioritize those particular interests, but because planning is often tied to capital, that's what we see happen.
The Neighborhood Association is still going strong and trying very hard to still be committed to inclusion. But the neighborhood's getting more expensive, and the whole image of Hamilton, in terms of how economic development is kind of portraying it, and what you might see in magazine articles and newspaper articles, it's that there's this new Hamilton that's very cool, and there's lots of like great restaurants to eat in, and things are just looking a little fancy downtown, especially along James Street and King William. And for me personally, it's a challenge, it's a tension, because I came into this neighborhood 10 years ago loving it, and I still love it. I just have so much concern for the people that really are the reason I moved to this neighborhood and who I've developed relationships with, and they're at risk of not being able to live here or feel as welcome here anymore.
Gentrification is a word that a lot of people don't like, and I think there's also a lot of misunderstanding about what the term means. So in the scholarly research, gentrification is a term that was coined by a sociologist named Ruth Glass in the 1960s sometime, and she thought of that term gentrification because it has its roots in gentry, and she was in the UK, and she was noticing how working class and impoverished neighborhoods were experiencing this new level of investment from middle and upper classes, the gentry, right, who wanted to move back in and restore these old Victorian houses and make them trendy again. And so we're taking advantage of the fact that these houses were available on the cheap, and they could then be revitalized.
Since 2004, 2005, when the newcomers they came, and they are residential in 181 John and 125 Wellington, and the one is 235, I think, Rebecca. It's that area we are more popular for Somalis. You know, it's a little Mogadishu. That's Beasley.
Our community consists of 2 high-rise buildings and the lower kind of townhouse complex at the John and Cannon, Houston and Robert area. In the last recent years, our buildings got bought out by a large property management company that's from Toronto. And since then, there have been renovations, kind of aggressive tactics from the landlord to get people out through eviction.
In the context of gentrification, I think about displacement as the sometimes quite direct and sometimes kind of subtle ways that people who are especially marginalized get encouraged or at times forced to move out of the neighborhoods that they live in and relocate elsewhere in the city.
Landlords choose to improve cosmetically neighboring units while tenants reside in units that are subpar, either bylaw standards or standards required by the Residential Tenancies Act in terms of maintenance. And so we're seeing landlords fail to keep units in a good state of repair, which aggravates tenants to a point where they feel like there's no choice but to move out.
They brought about 400 tenants through their office in the span of about 2 weeks. They sat down people and they said, over the next 3 years, we're going to be doing all these renovations. It's going to affect your quality of life here. It's likely that you're going to go days without water, days without hydro, and the noise will be unbearable. So in light of this, we would like to offer you this tenancy termination. We'll pay you $1,000 or $2,000 to sign this tenancy termination if you can be out within the month. And they emptied about 60% of their building within the first 1 or 2 months of doing that.
I know gentrification is specific in different neighborhoods, but in our neighborhood, it has particularly fallen harder on racialized single moms, in large families that are racialized, and also who are immigrant families, large immigrant families that are being threatened or aggressively approached, or are accused of not taking care of these units and saying that their families are too large.
What the research suggests is that having a low income is highly correlated with being from a racially minoritized community, for example. So people who are racially minoritized tend to be more greatly affected by displacement. Similarly, people who experience stigma due to mental health issues, people who are homeless, people who are using drugs or selling sex in order to survive, are all people who are highly stigmatized, highly vulnerable, not a lot of income, and greater at risk of displacement.
Last 5 years, it's the Beasley. It came for new owner, and kind of like they treated, especially the Somali community, since they don't know the language, is very, very badly.
And it's really affected our community, affected the look of it. There's less families now. Even the local school is reporting a huge decrease in their enrollment.
Really, they destroyed for their spirit, because that was what they called it themselves, is their own home. And when they said take this money and move out, where they can move for large families, and they accepted. It's not something we hide it as a community, for we are a large family.
I mean, I had a friend who was seen as a larger family to the landlord, who was blamed for the mold in her apartment, right? So there's mold in her apartment, and you have a superintendent saying, well, you just have too large a family, and that's causing all these issues, right? So it is connected to forms of racism and sexism, right? In addition to classism, like all these things are interlocked in these forces of gentrification.
We know is this film is you are trying Somali to interviewing for this film, and because why they refusing it is they don't want it to be a target. They don't want it if in case of the landlord see the tape, so they don't have to say, oh, so and so, I know his face, so I know where I can find it. So that's what they're afraid, because they don't know the language, they don't know the law more. So all they know is how to pay the rent and how to be a good citizen. That's the basic, the acknowledgement that they have it.
And there have been many cases where the fighting back or resisting was just not an option in terms of survival, right? I had a good friend, a single mom of 2 kids, who just does not have the time, resources, or money to be spending time fighting the landlord, and needed quickly to find another place to have her kids safely there.
The city could commit to prioritizing the needs of those who are the most at risk of displacement in these neighborhoods. And the city can do things around bylaws and zoning and regulating housing, right, and investing in social housing that actually reduce the risks of displacement getting really entrenched or continuing.
Access to justice really means lobbying with politicians and city councillors to ensure that when they get the call, that they're going to act and respond to it. A lot of people want to enforce their rights under the Residential Tenancies Act, but they're so busy addressing their most basic of needs, figuring out how they're going to maintain their housing, how they're going to feed their families. That access to justice isn't just filling out a form and having a forum in front of the landlord and tenant board. Access to justice is really equipping people with the tools to meet their needs so that when they do want to enforce their rights, that they don't feel disenfranchised while doing it.
But it takes some political will to do that, because again, on the one hand, you're up against developers and people who have a lot of money to invest, which is usually just recognized as an automatic good, right? New investment must be a good thing. City councilors are encouraged to attract new investment. So it requires a lot of political will to make that central to neighborhood development, I think, but it certainly is possible to do that.
I'm grateful that there are people like friends and community members who we can have conversations about this and we can talk and advocate, because I feel like I don't know exactly what to do, but I know we have to keep living out those values of making everyone feel welcome.
There are allies out there. Find allies in your neighbors. Knock on your neighbors' doors. Find other people that are going through the same situations that you are. Find groups like tenant solidarity networks. Find organizations that work with housing advocacy, and find legal clinics, things like that.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Roach, project coordinator of the Displacement Project. The Displacement Project started in November 2016 as a result of the displacement that is happening to new Canadians due to the gentrification in Hamilton. The Displacement Project is a collaboration between the Hamilton Community Legal Clinic, the Social Planning and Research Council of Hamilton, and Core Collaborative Learning. We are offering tools for tenant rights sessions to service providers and community leaders in 2 different neighborhoods in Hamilton, including the Beasley neighborhood. We are funded by the Connecting Communities stream of the Law Foundation of Ontario.
I'm glad I involved for Beasley community and LARA organization. Thank you.